The phone buzzed once against the kitchen counter. I didn't look right away. I was rinsing out a teacup, the water warm in my hands, the sky outside turning pale in a way that made everything look still. But when it buzzed again, then again, I dried my hands, picked it up, and saw my brother-in-law's name light the screen. That's when I knew. Hello? There was a pause, just long enough to hollow my chest. Margaret, there's been an accident. The words came in broken pieces. Ice, black road, a turn too late, no time to brake. I gripped the edge of the counter as if it could hold me steady. My knees locked. The house around me, the clock ticking, the hum of the fridge, suddenly sounded distant, muffled. The snow outside wasn't sparkling anymore. It looked gray, heavy, like it knew. They didn't make it, he said finally. Both of them. I didn't cry. Not then. My hand was still on the counter, the cold edge of the marble anchoring me to something real. I stared at the empty teacup, at the little ring it left behind on the counter. The smell of cedar from the hallway closet drifted in. I remember thinking, strangely, that I needed to put on another pot of water. I whispered, "What about Emily?" "She's okay, not a scratch. She's with the police. They asked if you could come." I don't remember what I said after that. Just that I nodded, even though no one could see me. Even though I didn't know how to be what she would need. I was just her aunt. Just the one who always remembered birthdays, not the one you run to when the world breaks apart. I hung up and stood in the quiet. Snow began to fall again, slow, soundless flakes brushing the kitchen window. My legs felt strange, like they didn't quite belong to me. I leaned against the counter and let the quiet wrap around me, thick and unkind. Didn't cry, not yet. Instead, I stared out at the snow, and in the corner of my mind, I heard my sister's laugh echoing through some old summer. And just like that, the silence inside me grew even louder. Every morning began the same. The smell of melting butter filled the kitchen before I even turned on the toaster. I always made her cinnamon toast just the way she liked, edges a little crisp, the middle still soft. The sugar would melt into tiny pools, and I'd press the knife gently so it didn't crack when she bit into it. She climbed into the chair, cross-legged, as always. Hair still wild from sleep, pajamas wrinkled, but there was a little hum in her throat. A tune I didn't recognize, probably something made up from cartoons and dreams. I'd place the plate in front of her, and without looking up, she'd say, "Thank you." "You're welcome, sweetheart," I'd whisper, brushing a crumb from her cheek with my thumb. The window was always cracked open just a little, letting in bird song and cool spring air that carried the promise of something softer. On some mornings, I'd watch her chewing, slow, deliberate, and I'd realize the house didn't echo the way it used to. Her voice, her tiny humming, it curled into the corners like steam rising from tea. It still didn't feel fully like home. Not yet. Sometimes, I'd walk into a room and expect to see someone who was gone. But here, in the kitchen, with cinnamon sugar clinging to the air and tiny bare feet swinging beneath the table, I started to believe we could build something new. She reached for her juice box, asked me if ants sleep at night. I told her I wasn't sure, and in that moment, watching her giggle into her straw, I didn't need the answer. I just knew. I wanted mornings like this, every single day. Her lunchbox sat on the counter, the zipper slightly crooked from too many little hands pulling. It open. I slipped a napkin inside, then tucked a small note beneath her sandwich. Today, it was a smiling sun drawn in bright yellow with 3 hearts underneath. She couldn't read it yet, but I hoped she could feel it anyway. The kitchen felt still after she left. Her chair pushed in, her voice quieted, but writing those notes made the silence gentler. It was my way of being there, even when I wasn't. a soft whisper from home, folded into her day. She sat by the old radiator, one shoe on, one off, her brow furrowed in the kind of focus only little ones have. Her tongue poked out as she tried again to loop the laces, over, under, around, but they slipped through her fingers like wet noodles. I knelt beside her, gently taking her small hands in mine. "Let's try again," I said, guiding her fingers. Slowly. "Make a bunny ear. Now the other one." She nodded, quiet and serious, her breath held like she was diffusing a bomb. I let her lead, just offering little touches when she hesitated. After 3 tries, her fingers finally found the rhythm. Loop, swoop, and pull. The bow wasn't perfect, but it held. Her eyes lit up, wide and full of pride. "I did it," she whispered. I clapped softly. "You sure did." She leaned into my side for just a second before hopping up and grabbing her other shoe. I sat back on my heels, smiling as the radiator clicked behind us, spreading warmth through the room. In that tiny moment, nothing felt broken. Not the past. Not our hearts. Just 2 people figuring it out, one knot at a time. The quilt had always been there, folded neatly on the back of the couch, colors faded from too many washes and memories. It belonged to my mother, then to my sister. I used to run my fingers along the stitching when I was a child, tracing the tiny pink roses sewn into its fabric. That evening, she crawled up beside me, blanket in hand, cartoons flickering on the screen. "Can we use this one?" she asked. "Of course," I said, helping her spread it over our legs. She nestled in, feet tangled with mine, a warm weight against my side. As the room filled with the sound of animated voices, she pointed at one of the roses. "That one looks like a jelly bean." "It does," I smiled. "My mother stitched that one when she was just a little younger than you." "Really?" she asked, eyes wide. I nodded. "Every square has a story." She didn't say anything after that, just leaned into me, head resting against my shoulder, fingers gently touching the fabric as if listening. That old quilt held more than warmth. It held roots. And now it held her too. There were toys in places they hadn't belonged before. A tiny plastic pony perched on the bathroom sink. Crayon drawings fluttered from the fridge, held by magnets shaped like fruit. Her laughter echoed through the hallway as she galloped from room to room, trailing stuffed animals behind her like parade floats. One morning, I stepped square on a building block in the hallway, sharp, unexpectedly, and instead of cursing, I laughed. That moment startled me. Not just the block, but the laughter. It came out of me before I could think. Full, warm. A sound I hadn't heard from myself in a long time. My quiet house was messy now, cluttered with life, with movement, with small things that shouted, "She is here." And I didn't mind at all. It hit me one evening as I brushed her hair. Slow strokes, careful not to tug at the knots. She sat quietly on a little stool, watching the hallway light dance on the floor while I hummed a lullaby I hadn't sung in years. Her hair was soft, the scent of baby shampoo rising with each stroke. I realized I wasn't just helping her heal. I was healing too. There was something sacred in the way she leaned back into me, trusting. In the way I tucked her socks into the drawer beside mine. In the quiet rhythm of caring for someone so small, and in doing so, finding the parts of myself I'd forgotten. Grief hadn't left. But love, this kind of love, was doing what time alone couldn't. Mending slowly, gently in the cracks. She turned to me, half asleep, and asked, "Can we sing the Jelly Bean song again?" And without missing a beat, I said yes. Because in that moment, the Jelly Bean song was everything. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because the sun had just started casting that golden light through the kitchen window, and I'd set the table with her favorite placemats, those ones with faded cartoon ducks. I had just taken the roasted potatoes out of the oven, the scent of rosemary thick in the air, when I heard her heavy footsteps on the stairs. "Dinner's ready," I called, trying to keep my voice light. She appeared at the top of the stairs, arms crossed tight, eyes stormy. "I said I'm not hungry," she snapped. I looked up at her, still holding the serving spoon. "Just come sit for a minute, sweetheart. You don't have to eat." And then, without warning, her voice rose, sharp and trembling. "You're not my real mom, so stop acting like you are." The spoon slipped from my hand and hit the counter with a soft clatter. She turned and slammed her bedroom door so hard that the picture frames on the hallway wall shivered. The silence afterward felt like something alive. I stood there with a dish towel in one hand and dinner in the other, the smell of garlic and rosemary still warm in the air. But none of it mattered now. My legs moved eventually. I set the food down, slowly, as if I could hold the moment together by not making a sound. My heart didn't break, not right away. It cracked, like old porcelain, hairline first, spreading with every breath I tried to take. I found it that night, the blanket, buried in the back of the linen closet, under a stack of old sheets I hadn't touched in years. It was faded now, soft at the corners, pink with little yellow stars, the one she used to drag everywhere when she was 4. I sat down right there in the hallway, the light from the lamp above spilling dim and golden onto the carpet. I held the blanket against my chest, like it might answer me if I pressed hard enough. I didn't cry for myself. I cried for the little girl who used to fall asleep wrapped in this, curled up against my shoulder, trusting me completely. I cried for the space now growing between us, space wide enough to echo. I buried my face into that soft cotton and let the tears come. Quietly, like a secret I wasn't proud of. Outside, the rain had started tapping gently against the window, and I sat there, tucked into the hallway, like it was the only place in the house that still understood what I was holding. They say teenagers say things they don't mean. I repeated that sentence in my head, like a prayer. She didn't hate me, she was just angry, confused, testing the edges of herself. I told myself all the right things. This was normal, this was expected, it would pass. But even in the quiet of those thoughts, something stung. I sat in my robe on the couch, the TV flickering across the room. A show I wasn't really watching hummed in the background. My tea sat untouched, cooling by the minute. My hands wrapped around the mug, more for comfort than heat. Had I done too much? Or not enough? Had I smothered her with love? Or left her just enough room to believe I didn't belong? I wanted to believe this would heal, that she'd come back, softer, older, understanding. But that night, all I had was a mug of cold tea, a flickering screen, and the ache of wondering whether the distance between us had been growing longer than I'd realized. She didn't come down for dinner that night. I wrapped the plate and slid it into the fridge, the rosemary chicken still steaming under the plastic. In the morning, the container was gone. Her plate sat in the sink, rinsed. The fork, too. No crumbs, no note. Just clean dishes left behind, like proof. I stood there at the counter, hands on the edge, staring at the empty spot where the food had been. She hadn't said she was sorry. She hadn't come into the kitchen or offered a glance. But the plate, clean and quietly placed, was something. Maybe even love, spoken in the only language she knew how to speak that day. The days that followed felt longer than they were. We still moved around each other. I packed her lunch. She left without saying goodbye. She came home, walked past me, and shut her door. Repeat. She wasn't cruel. She was just somewhere else, inside herself, and I kept pretending it didn't hurt. I made scrambled eggs the way she liked them, left fresh towels in the bathroom, brushed the dust from her bookshelf even though she hadn't touched it in weeks. But the quiet started to press in. By evening, I'd find myself alone in the living room, her old storybooks stacked beside me. I used to read them out loud, voices and all, just to hear her laugh. Now I just looked at the covers and remembered the sound of her feet racing across the hallway, blanket in one hand, dreams in the other. She was still here, but I missed her, just the same. It happened on a morning when the world looked silver. The kitchen window had fogged over with frost, just like it used to when she was small. Without thinking, I reached for it and traced her name with my finger. Careful, slow, the way I always had. Madison. I paused, staring at those soft letters, the glass cold beneath my fingertip. She used to smile when she saw that. She'd add a heart at the end and giggle. This time she walked right past me, said nothing. But later that day, when I came back in for tea, I saw something new under her name. Just one word, in her handwriting. Hi. It wasn't much, just 3 letters, a tiny curl at the end of the I. But I stood there in the doorway, hand on the frame, and let it hold me for a moment. Sometimes love doesn't walk back in with fanfare. Sometimes it whispers through glass, waiting to be read. She used to run toward me at pickup, arms flapping like wings, hair flying, her backpack bouncing behind her. That stopped somewhere along the way. One day I was waiting in my usual spot, and she just waved. A polite, small wave. No smile, no sprint. I waved back, of course, smiled like it didn't sting. It was a week later when I heard her. She was walking with 2 other girls, all chatter and bracelets and borrowed slang. One of them asked, "Who's that?" She said it like she was naming a street, flat, distant. "That's just my aunt. Not Mom, just Aunt." It wasn't shameful on her face, not exactly. Just separation. I don't even think she realized what it did to me. I stood by the car, keys in hand, nodding like nothing happened. But something did. She climbed in, pulled out her phone, and I asked how her day went. She said, "Fine," without looking up. And I drove us home in the warm hum of spring, windows cracked, sun catching the corners of my eyes. I kept smiling, even as something inside me quietly stepped further away from her, trying not to show it had been left behind. Her Sweet 16 came and went like a party I wasn't invited to, even though it was in my house. She planned it with her friends, glittered posters, neon lights, confetti that stuck to the baseboards for weeks. I stayed in the kitchen, watching it all from behind the counter. She never asked for help, never asked me what kind of cake I thought she'd want, or if I remembered the song she used to dance to when she was 5. I refilled the punch, replaced napkins, keep the chips from running low. They brought cupcakes, store-bought, frosted high. There were no candles, no wishes, just laughter spilling out into the hallway, curling through the house like a tune I almost remembered. I heard her laugh. Not the soft one she gave me when I told a joke. A newer one, louder, wider, meant for her friends. I stood at the sink, hands in warm water, washing cups that weren't mine. The house was full, but I'd never felt lonelier in it. She didn't mean to leave me out. I think that hurt more, that she didn't notice I was already on the outside, watching a celebration I wasn't part of. Only the cleanup crew to the girl I had raised. I still bake her favorite cake every year, vanilla with strawberry jam between the layers, whipped frosting on top. I never asked if she wanted it. I just made it. Set it on the counter with a note that said, "Happy birthday." Sometimes a heart. Sometimes just her name. She never said anything. But the next morning, a slice would be gone. Then another. By the second day, half the cake would be missing, like she'd stopped pretending she didn't care. She never thanked me, never acknowledged the plate she left in the sink. But I washed it anyway. I stood at the counter one night, watching the fridge hum in the quiet. The cake sat under its glass dome, one last piece left, the crumbs scattered like proof that something between us still lived. She may have outgrown the candles, the singing, but she hadn't outgrown the taste of something made just for her. And that was enough for me to keep baking, even if no one ever asked. Her bedroom door used to stay open just a crack, just enough for me to peek in and see her reading or sketching or dozing off mid-movie. I'd knock gently and ask if she needed water. Sometimes she'd say yes, sometimes no, but the door stayed. Cracked, then it didn't. She started closing it all the way, not in anger, just in growing silence. Music played louder now. Laughter came through her phone, not from across the dinner table. I could hear her talk for hours, just not to me. Used to knock and offer stories. Now I walked by and paused, hand hovering near the frame, not quite touching. I'd listen for a shift in the music, a break in the conversation, anything to suggest she still wanted me nearby. But the door stayed closed, and I stayed outside. I whispered, "Good night," through the wood once, low enough that she probably didn't hear. Or maybe she did. Maybe she just didn't know how to answer anymore. I folded her laundry like it was scripture, each shirt laid flat, smoothed with open palms. Socks paired gently, tucked heel to toe. Her jeans, still slightly damp from hanging, folded just right so the creases didn't stiffen. She never noticed. Or at least, never said so. She'd toss them into her drawers without a glance. Sometimes, rolled up in balls, sometimes kicked aside with a sigh. And still, I folded them carefully the next week. And the next, because love doesn't always need to be noticed to matter. Some things are sacred even when they're invisible. As I folded, I'd remember tiny fingers gripping mine in the supermarket, shoes tied loosely by her own small hands, her voice calling for me from the bathtub just to tell me she liked the bubbles. Couldn't fix what we'd lost with apologies or perfect words. But maybe, just maybe, I could with quiet devotion, tucked into every folded sleeve. No matter what time she said she'd be home, I left the porch light on. It didn't matter if it was midnight or after. I never asked where she was. I just made sure the light was there, glowing soft against the dark, the kind that says, "You're still welcome here." I'd sit by the window sometimes, book in my lap, pretending to read. But really, I was listening. Waiting for the crunch of gravel, the turn of the doorknob, the sigh of the screen door. There were nights she came home silent, slipped past without a word. I didn't stop her, didn't question, just let her pass. Then turned off the light. Once I heard her door close upstairs. Love doesn't need an audience, it just needs to stay steady, so I kept that light on. Not because I thought she was lost, but because I wanted her to know, no matter how far she went, she could always find her way back home. I was just looking for tape. Nothing more. The drawer in the kitchen was empty, so I walked to the hall. Closet, expecting the usual. Spare batteries, old puzzles, maybe a strand of tangled Christmas lights. I opened the door and was met with the soft scent of lemonwood polish and that familiar mix of cardboard and dust. I reached past the jumble of board games and felt something solid. A shoebox, tucked behind an old tablecloth. It was taped shut, at the corners, the lid sagging just slightly with age. I didn't recognize it. It wasn't labeled. No date. Just dust and a faded blue lid. My fingers hovered over the edge, hesitating. I wasn't sure why. It wasn't tape. It wasn't what I came for. But something about the weight of it. It felt like holding something sacred. Something I wasn't meant to find, but needed to. My hands shook as I lifted it out. The light from the hallway window hit the top just right, catching the grain of old paper beneath. I stood there a long moment, box pressed to my chest, unsure if I was ready for whatever waited inside. I took the box to the dining table and opened it slowly, as if it might whisper. Inside were folded papers, napkins, envelopes with crayon scribbles. My own handwriting stared back at me. Crooked hearts, little suns, tiny affirmations I'd tucked into her lunchbox all those years ago. Have fun today. You are my sunshine. Love you always. The corners were curled and smudged, but she had kept them. Beneath those were drawings, stick figures of us baking, reading, holding hands, her in a crown, me with a book. One had the words "Me and Mom" scribbled in orange. There was even a napkin, crumpled, soft as tissue, from the night of her first recital. I had wrapped it around a cookie and slipped it into her coat pocket. I thought she'd tossed it, but she hadn't. She had saved it all. Every little note I thought had gone unnoticed. She'd seen it. She'd felt it. Even if she never said it out loud. I ran my hand over the edges, gently, like touching the face of a memory. That box didn't just hold paper. It held proof. Tucked near the bottom, curled between layers of folded notes, was a yellow post-it. Faded, but still sticky on one side. Her handwriting, looped, a little unsure, a little grown, spelled out just one sentence. For the only mom I've ever known. I didn't breathe. My fingers trembled as I picked it up, the edges soft from time. Ink just slightly smudged at the corner, like maybe her thumb had pressed too long. I pressed it to my chest. Not dramatically, not with tears yet, but with something quieter, something heavier. I sat back in the chair, the sun low now, light softening the room around me. The hallway clock ticked faintly, steady. A drawer left open whispered lavender, into the air. It wasn't loud. There was no music swell, no monologue, no camera waiting to capture my reaction, just me, holding a tiny square of truth in my hand. I had waited so many years to hear those words. I never expected to find them written, waiting, patient inside a box I nearly missed while looking for tape. I didn't mean to sit. I just sort of sank. The chair felt too far. The table was too cold. The floor, though, it welcomed me. I held the box in my lap, the post-it still in my hand. My back against the wall, knees bent, light fading through the curtains. The dust in the air moved like breath. And then I cried. Not the kind of cry that storms. The kind that releases. That spills down your cheeks slow and warm, like grief melting, into something softer. All the years of wondering, all the waiting, all the quiet love given without answer, answered. I cried because of loneliness, for the lost birthdays and unopened stories, for the empty hallway between us that had always felt too wide, and I cried for the joy of knowing, even if she didn't say it, she knew. She had always known. For a moment, I didn't feel like the one holding everything together. I felt held, and that kind of love. It's the rarest kind. We ate dinner like nothing had changed. She talked about her classes, her friends, and a movie trailer she wanted to see. I nodded along, dishing out leftovers, watching her laughter bloom across the room. I didn't say anything about the box. She didn't know I'd found it. She didn't know the yellow post-it sat tucked inside my bedside drawer now, safe as a prayer, and I didn't need her to, because her love had already been spoken, in childish drawings, crooked hearts, and a single square of paper that healed. More than a conversation ever could. After dinner, she passed behind my chair and said, "Thanks for dinner, love you." So casually, so gently. I watched her disappear into the hallway, her plate in the sink, her socks leaving faint prints on the floor. I smiled. Some things don't need to be announced. Some truths sit quietly in boxes, waiting to be found when we're finally ready to hold them. Time doesn't stop. It doesn't even pause. It just drifts, like dust on windowsills, settling so slowly you hardly notice until the sunlight catches it. She moved out quietly, box by box, first to the dorm, then an apartment, across town, then somewhere I didn't quite memorize. Her room stayed the same. I never changed the sheets. I couldn't bring myself to. The hallway stayed quieter after that. No more half-shouted phone calls or music spilling under her door. Just the hum of the heater and the creak of the stairs. When I carried laundry up for no one, dinners shrank from 2 plates to 1. I still made enough for both of us. I always did. Sometimes I caught myself setting her place without thinking. Then I'd tuck the extra plate back into the cabinet like a secret. I dusted less. I watered the plants slower. Her laughter, no longer, echoed down my walls, but I could still hear it in the places memory liked to sit, in the corners of the couch, in the worn pages of cookbooks we used to flip through on lazy Sundays. Love stayed. But it waited now, quiet and patient. The front steps creaked just once. I wouldn't have noticed it, except the house had been still all morning, and sound travels differently in silence. I looked up from the kitchen and saw them first, those gray boots, the ones with the worn heels and frayed lining, the ones she used to kick off by the door without a second thought. My breath caught, not loudly, just enough that my hand hovered above the dish towel, waiting. She stepped inside like she was asking a question with her. Body, no suitcase, no dramatic entry, just her. Slimmer maybe, older in the face, but still her. Hey, she said, voice softer than I remembered. Hey, I replied, and that was it. No hug, no apology. Just her standing in the doorway, shoes scuffed from the road. My heart didn't leap. It unfolded, carefully, like a quilt long packed away. She walked into the kitchen like she still belonged, and I let her. No questions. No pressure, just a mother, holding her breath, trying not to make a sound loud enough to scare away whatever had finally found its way home. She brought coffee. 2 cups. Mine had just a little cream, no sugar, just the way I always made it. I didn't ask how she remembered. I just wrapped my hands around the mug and let the warmth seep into the quiet space between us. We sat at the table, not across from each other, but side by side. The fridge hummed. The sunlight fell gently on. The counter lighting up a cluster of crumbs I hadn't wiped away. She didn't say much. Neither did I. But the coffee said enough. She remembered. That was all I needed. I sipped, and so did she. Every so often, her fingers would tap the side of the cup, like they used to when she was thinking. I pretended not to notice. It wasn't a reconciliation. It wasn't an apology. But it was something, a gesture. Her presence was a gift I didn't want to unwrap too quickly. I just wanted to sit there with it, warm in my hands, until it told me what it meant. She asked me how the daffodils were doing. Coming in early, I said. Might be the warm spring. She nodded, then asked about the lilacs. I asked if work was busy. She said yes, that was all. We talked about the weather, about the garden, about the price of milk, and whether the new neighbors across the street had chickens or just a loud radio. Not a word about the box, not a mention of the note. And that was okay, because sometimes healing doesn't look like a conversation. Sometimes it's 2 people sipping coffee and pretending the silence in between is comfortable. She reached for a second cup, poured her own. No asking, just familiarity. That small act filled the room more than any story could have. We were neighbors that morning, not mother and daughter, not quite. But something was blooming underneath the politeness, like green stems pushing through dirt that had stayed cold too long. She paused mid-sentence. I don't remember what she was saying, something about her co-worker's birthday cake, I think. But her voice faded for a moment, and she smiled. Not the practiced smile. Not the one she gave at school events or in quick photos. This one was smaller, real. A flicker of softness I hadn't seen in years. Her hand brushed mine when she reached for the sugar bowl. Neither of us pulled away. That moment didn't ask for anything. It didn't shout. It just was. Her fingers tapped. The rim of her mug and the way she glanced at me, quick, gentle, like checking if I noticed, made something inside my chest settle. I held on to that look the way you hold on to spring's first bloom. You don't cut it. You don't frame it. You just breathe it in and let it remind you that maybe, just maybe, this season will be kinder than the last. We went back to sipping our coffee, talking about cake. But everything had changed, quietly, fully, without either of us having to say a single word. I didn't expect a knock that day. It was a soft one, barely louder than the wind rattling the porch railings. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door, not knowing what I'd find. There she was, hair pulled back, in a messy knot, diaper bag slung over one shoulder, and on her hip, a baby, round-cheeked, pink-nosed, blinking up at me like I was already someone. My breath caught in my throat. She looked tired. Not the kind you fix with sleep, the kind you carry in your bones. The baby shifted, and her mother adjusted her hold, the gesture both practiced and careful. I opened the screen door and whispered, "You both look tired." And for once, she didn't correct me. She just nodded, lips pressed together in a line that wasn't quite a smile, but wasn't a wall either. Behind her, the porch bloomed with geraniums. The breeze carried baby powder and lilac. She stepped inside, like she wasn't sure if she belonged. But I stepped aside, letting her pass, holding the door open like it was a second chance. She sat the baby down on the rug while she rummaged through her bag for a bottle. The little one crawled toward me without hesitation, just a soft thump-thump of padded hands and knees on the hardwood. I crouched without thinking, my knees creaking, hands out. She reached up, her tiny fingers wrapped around my thumb like they'd done it 1,000 times before. And just like that, something in me melted. That ache, the warm kind. The one that sneaks in through the ribs and settles in the center of your chest. I hadn't held a baby in years. But it all came back like breath. How to sway gently, how to hum under your breath, how to whisper silly words that don't matter, but somehow mean everything. Her hand stayed wrapped around mine as she looked up at me with wide, trusting eyes. She didn't ask for anything. Just gave her hand like it belonged to me, and I took it like I'd never let it go. She toddled across the rug, babbling to herself in soft little bursts, half sounds, half declarations. When she reached me, she stopped, looked up, and with complete certainty said, "Grandma." Just one word. No pause. No testing it out. She said it like she'd always known. I didn't answer right away. Couldn't. My throat closed. I glanced at her mother, sitting across the room with her tea. She didn't say a word, just stared into the mug, her face unreadable but not closed. I looked back down at those wide, fearless eyes. That sweet baby scent rising from her curls. She said it again, this time with a smile. "Grandma." And I felt it in my bones, in my soul, in the quiet place that had ached for years. I didn't correct her. I couldn't speak. Because some names aren't given, they're earned, and when they're spoken, freely, purely, they become more than names. They become the truth. I made the toy cow moo, a long, exaggerated, silly moo that echoed off the walls. She burst out laughing, not just a chuckle, a full belly jiggle that shook her tiny shoulders. It filled the room, bounced off the windows, found corners I didn't know still needed joy. I made the cow moo again. She laughed harder. I looked up, and there was her mother standing in the doorway, just watching, not interrupting, not judging, just watching. Her arms were crossed, but not in the way that meant distance. Her eyes were soft. Guarded, yes, but soft. Like she didn't quite trust what she saw, but wanted to. We didn't talk about what we used to be. We didn't talk about what we weren't. But in that little girl's laughter, in the joy that danced through the same house that once held so much silence, we both heard something healing. Something neither of us had the words for. They were packing up to leave. The baby's coat was halfway on, the diaper bag looped over her mother's shoulder again. I stood near the door, holding it open. The porch light had flickered on, casting a soft amber glow across the steps. As they turned to go, The baby leaned in, reached up, and kissed my cheek. No one asked her to. She just did it. I looked at her mother. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say sorry. She didn't say I love you. She didn't need to. The baby had already said it for her. In one quiet moment, one small hand around my finger, one word whispered in the center of the living room. Some love doesn't arrive wrapped in declarations. It arrives with warm cheeks, soft giggles, and tiny kisses at the end of long visits. And I let them go with nothing more than a wave, because I knew, deep down, that I had already been given everything I ever needed. I was folding her baby's laundry, tiny socks with polka dots, little onesies soft from too many washes, when it slipped out. "You were the same way when you were little," I said, smiling without looking up. Just a thought, nothing more. Something sweet to say in passing. But the air shifted. She didn't say anything at first, but I saw it in the way her shoulders pulled in, tight across her back. The room felt smaller. The sunlight through the nursery window didn't feel warm anymore. It just felt exposed. She kept folding, but slower. More precise. I held a tiny pink sock in my hand, still warm from the dryer, and wished I could pull the words back. Not because they were wrong, but because they had landed somewhere tender I couldn't see. The scent of fabric softener hung between us, lavender and warm cotton, and I suddenly felt like I'd spoken out of place in a room I helped build. Glanced at her, waiting for the moment to soften. But it didn't. It just sat there, quiet, sharp, familiar. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Stop acting like my mom." That's all she said. The words landed like a slammed door, louder in their quiet than anything she could have shouted. I froze, one tiny sock still in my hand. My breath held tight in my chest, like it might break if I exhaled too hard. She didn't look at me when she said it, just kept gathering the baby's toys, folding the changing pad, buckling the diaper bag like it was all just part of her routine. Watched her from the floor, surrounded by little folded onesies and bibs with ducklings on them. Things I had carefully cleaned, paired, pressed. All of it done with love. My hands were full of her baby's things. My heart was full of her memory. And all of it suddenly felt like it didn't belong to me. She turned, bag slung over her shoulder, the baby gurgling softly. I stood still in the middle of it all, unmoving, unneeded, uninvited. And the hum of the washer from the hallway suddenly felt too loud. I should have said something. I should have smiled, brushed it off, acted like it didn't sting, but I couldn't. Instead, I walked slowly into the living room and sat down on the edge of the couch. The cushion sighed under me. Tired like I was, I held the pair of baby socks I'd been folding. Just sat there, one in each hand, staring at the tiny seams, the curve meant for feet, not even walking yet. I thought about how many times I'd folded socks like these. First hers, now her daughter's. All those quiet hours. All that cares, and... Suddenly my hands felt steady, but my chest did not. I didn't cry, but my heart sagged in a way that made breathing feel like effort. The sun was dipping behind the trees outside, casting long shadows across the rug. I didn't move. I didn't clean up the laundry. I just sat there, sock in hand, wondering how something as small as a sentence could undo so many quiet years. Thought we were past this, past the lines between aunt and mother, past the years of slammed doors, of silence, of wondering if I'd ever be enough. I thought time had softened us. I thought I had earned something solid. I held her baby. I sang lullabies. I was the one who showed up with soup, who rocked her, daughter to sleep, who knew where the pacifiers were without looking. I believed we had crossed the hard bridge, the one made of resentment and missing names. I thought we had found something whole on the other side. But her words, those 5 quiet words, made the ground shake again, and I realized something that hurt more than I expected. Maybe love when unofficial is always conditional. Maybe it doesn't matter how many nights I stayed up with her fever, how many lunches I packed, how many drawings she brought home to me, calling me Mom without question. Maybe my place was still fragile. A place I had built, but not one she had fully given, and the clock on the wall kept ticking, louder than it had all day. She was halfway to the hallway before I found my voice. It wasn't strong. It wasn't loud. It wasn't anything that would stop her, but I whispered it. But I am. She didn't turn around. She didn't pause. She just kept walking, the soft part of her footsteps swallowed by the creak of the floorboards. I sat back in the chair, staring at the doorway she'd passed through. My voice still hung there in the air, barely audible. But it was mine. I didn't say it to win. I didn't say it to make her feel guilty. I said it because it was true. I am her mom. Maybe not by law, maybe not by biology, but in every scraped knee, every lunchbox note, every sleepless night, in every lullaby and homework check and whispered bedtime prayer. I am. The porch light flickered outside, casting a soft gold glow through the front window. The house felt still, like it had heard me, like it was holding my words in its walls. I didn't chase her. I didn't cry. I just sat there with the truth, wrapping it around myself like a worn shawl. It still fit. She didn't call first, just knocked, softly, like maybe she wasn't sure if I'd answer, or if I even should. I opened the door, and there she was. Same sweatshirt from yesterday, hair in a loose braid over one shoulder. No baby this time. Just her. In her hand, a to-go coffee cup she didn't seem interested in. She didn't say hello. Just stepped aside and sat on the top step of the porch like she used to when she was a teenager. Legs pulled up, arms resting on her knees. I didn't speak, just followed. Sat down beside her. The boards were warm from the sun, the wind chimes clinking gently in the breeze. Her face looked tired. Not just from lack of sleep, but from holding too much in for too long. She didn't cry. Neither did I. We just sat there side by side, our shadows stretching together across the planks. My hands fidgeted, unsure where to rest. I wanted to fix it. But some things you don't fix. You wait for them to breathe. So I sat, the silence between us heavy, but not angry, and slowly, like sunlight on skin, something softer settled between us. She pointed to the garden before anything else. Your lavender's blooming early, I nodded. Might be the warm spring. She leaned forward slightly, squinting toward the flower beds. Are the squirrels still chewing the feeder? I smiled. Little thieves. I filled it yesterday. It's already half gone. She laughed, not fully, just a soft exhale. But it was something. She asked about the tomatoes. I asked about her commute. She told me the baby liked pears now. I told her the rosemary survived the frost after all. We talked about everything that didn't matter, and yet somehow mattered more than anything else, because we weren't ready for what had been. Said, not yet. The garden was safer ground. It had no history, no edges, just dirt and bees and green things trying their best to grow. Sometimes small talk isn't small at all. It's a kind of reaching. A hand extended without showing the palm. So I gave her the lavender updates, the squirrel reports. All of it. And underneath each word, I left a little space open in case she wanted to step inside it. She was quite a long time after that. I thought she'd leave without saying what she'd come to say. But then she leaned her arms onto her knees, eyes fixed on something in the trees. I was mad at the world, she said. I didn't move. She shook her head, barely. At them. What happened, at how everything changed. Her voice cracked just once. And you were the only one left. She didn't look at me when she said it, and that's when I understood. She hadn't hated me. She hadn't resented me. She had needed someone to carry the weight of all that fury, and I had been the one standing still when everything else fell apart. Because I stayed. That's what hurt and what healed all at once. I didn't say a word. I just listened. Sometimes, the most painful truths are also the ones that break things open in the right places. There was something about the light that day. It filtered through the porch rails in long, soft lines. She sat beside me, chin lifted just enough to catch it on her cheekbone. And for a moment, she wasn't my girl. She was my sister. The same jawline. The same way of pressing her lips together when she didn't want to cry. The same quiet strength that showed up at the edges of hurt. I saw them both. Her and the sister I lost. I turned to her, heart full of everything I couldn't say, and for a moment I thought, maybe this is the moment to speak it all. But I didn't. Instead, I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Our fingers laced, slow and natural, like we'd done it 100 times before, even if we hadn't. No words. No explanations. Just her hand in mine, warm and steady. And in that moment, I didn't feel the years or the wounds or the names we hadn't said. I felt a thread being tied back together, a quiet knot. She turned her head, finally, look right at me. Her eyes were tired but clear. You were the one who stayed. It came out like a sigh, like a truth she'd been holding too long behind her teeth. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat was tight and my hands were already full, with the weight of those words. It didn't erase what came before. It didn't fix every ache, but it gave the ache somewhere to rest. Those 6 words stitched something together. Not neatly, not quickly, but enough to say, you mattered. I see it now. You didn't have to stay, but you did. The wind picked up a little, rustling the leaves in the trees beyond the porch, and for the first time in years, I felt something settle in my chest, like a book finally closed, not with a slam, but a sigh. She looked away, and I kept looking, because I didn't want to forget what her face looked like when she finally saw me. People used to ask, "Is she your daughter?" And I used to hesitate, used to stammer out something like, "Well, I raised her," or "I'm her aunt, technically." Technically. That word did more harm than help. I'd smile, try to make it sound simple. But it never was, not to me. Now, I don't explain anymore. If someone asks, I just say, yes. Because yes is true. Not in paperwork or DNA, but in the scraped knees I kissed, the birthday cakes I baked, the sleepless nights I rocked her through, whispering lullabies into the dark. Love isn't something you prove with a blood test. It's something you show up for, again and again, even when the door gets slammed in your face. Now, with coffee warm in my hand and sunlight lifting the curtains, I sit by the kitchen window and smile to myself. She calls, she visits, she lets me hold. Her child. And if anyone asks again, I won't blink. Yes, I'll say, because I stayed. And that's what makes me a mother. Every Tuesday afternoon, I hear the knock before the door creaks open. Tiny footsteps come running across the rug, curls bouncing, arms wide. "Story, Grandma!" she yells like it's the only name I've ever had. And maybe it is now. She barrels into me like joy itself, already asking for the pirate one, or the one about the bear who couldn't find his socks. I settle onto the couch, book in lap, glasses slipping down my nose. She climbs beside me, her hand in mine, cheek resting on my arm. Her mother stands nearby, smiling in that quiet way, sipping tea and pretending not to listen. The stories I once read to her mother, the same rhythm, the same silly voices, spill out of me like a song I never forgot. Sometimes her daughter interrupts, asking if I made up the ending. I always say yes, even when I don't. Some stories don't skip generations, they just return softer, rounder, with less hurt and more laughter. When she looks at me like I hung the moon, I feel it in my bones. Not because I'm old, because I've lived enough to know that names don't always come from birth. Sometimes they come from love. She showed up with flour on her jeans and a baby on her hip. Didn't ask questions, just handed her the mixing bowl and smiled. We didn't talk about the years we lost. We didn't need to. The way she stood beside me, shoulder brushing mine, said everything. The radio hummed low, some old song from her childhood. I cracked the eggs. She measured the sugar. The baby babbled on the floor, covered in flour by the end of it, and we laughed, really laughed, the kind that shakes the kitchen windows a little, the kind that feels like forgiveness, even when no one says the word. She flicked batter at me with a wooden spoon. I gasped. She grinned. I wiped it off with a dish rag and thought, this is what healing looks like. Not grand apologies, just hands moving in rhythm. Laughter echoing off the walls that once held silence. The cake didn't rise quite right. The edges browned too fast. But when we cut into it, steam rising between us, it tasted like something whole, like nothing had ever been broken. It's in the little things. The way she folds the baby's clothes, sleeves tucked just so, socks paired. Gently, the way she stirs soup, one hand on her hip, humming under her breath. The way her smile fades at the end of a long day, but still reaches her eyes. And suddenly I see her. My sister. I see the woman who laughed too loud and made pancakes. On Wednesdays. I see the girl who held my hand after our mother's funeral. I see the mother she never got the chance to be. I see her daughter. And sometimes I see myself. All of us, stitched into one story, still unfolding. We don't talk about lineage. We don't untangle who she came from and who she belongs to. We just exist in the same room, breathing the same air, carrying the same grief and the same love. The baby giggles, soap bubbles rising from the sink. Outside, the sky blushes with twilight, and inside, 3 women, 2 living, 1 remembered, go on writing their quiet, beautiful chapters. Together. I wasn't given a daughter, I became one. Through scraped knees and whispered bedtime songs, through slammed doors and years that went too quiet. Through 1 yellow post-it and 1 grandbaby's arms, I may not have been her beginning, but I was in her middle, her storm, her safe place, her second chance. And when her daughter calls me Grandma, it doesn't feel like a gift, it feels like the truth. The porch light is on now. The house glows warm behind me. The wind carries laughter from the living room. A new voice, a little one, learning the same stories I used to tell. I rock gently in my chair, blanket across my lap, hands folded in memory. She called me Mom once. Then I didn't, then did it again, without saying it, and that's the part that matters. I was her mom. I still am, not because I gave her life, but because I stayed, and she knows it. Thank you for sitting with me through all of that. If you've ever held love without a title, or stayed even when it wasn't easy, I see you. If you feel like sharing your own story, I'll be right here reading the comments. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, I'd be honored to have you stick around. If my story touched your heart, I kindly ask you to like this video and subscribe. I'll be here every day, sharing more stories just for you. Thank you, my dear.